What is going on, miners, and welcome back to the Hobbyist Miner channel. Well, I'm going to make this one short and sweet, but I definitely want to let you guys know crypto mining is dangerous. And let me go ahead and show you. So take a look at this. You see that? Look at this. I can't even pull this out of here. Look at that. It's insane. Look at that. Let me get closer. How about this one over here? Or how about another one over here? There's a little bit of brown on this one too. So what is going on here? So I have been mining with my mini Doge miners off of breakout boards. And we've been using something like this. So we have our 1200 watt HP power supply. We have it plugged in like that. And then these go into our mini Doge miners. I have 5 of them currently right now. And I was away not too long ago in Las Vegas, many of you guys know. And my wife told me, like, hey, she smelled like melting plastic. And I said, all right, well, let me know if you smell it later. She didn't smell anything. Well, I came home. I always like to do a inspection a few times a week. And we found this. And this is what we were smelling. And why is this going on? So I was like, oh my gosh, like this is crazy. So I took my power supply, I put it aside. I put this breakout board aside. And I grabbed another one. And then it happened again. And I grabbed another one. And a few days later, it happened again. So I'm like, what is going on here? And so I want to show you guys. Okay, I had to find it. Here it is right here. So this is a surface temperature gun. Nothing crazy. It's like 20 bucks off of Amazon if you guys do want to check it out. And let me show you where my problem is. So first off, let's take a look here. So if I go to, this is a 1200 watt 6600 rig, and I put this and the little laser right on a typical connector until it says 106, 112, 104. Got it? Let's go up here. We have these two. Actually, I said 5 in the beginning of the video. We have 4 total. And look. This one's already starting to brown again. Well, let's take a look at one that's not browning. 150. 138. 141. 203. Let's take a look at the cable. 157 on that one. 140. 122. 127. So what's going on here? Well, let's go ahead and talk about it. So we got a box in from the Veteran Miner. I'll put a link down below to his YouTube channel. I've been chatting with him recently. We're going to talk to him in just a few minutes. And he sent me, check these out, guys. After learning about what was going on, he sent me custom length. Look at that. That is amazing. Custom length cables. Okay, because what he told me is even though these cables say 18 gauge on them, can I find it? Let's find it. Here it is right here. Right there near my finger. Not sure if you can read it. Let's see. Says 18 gauge. He let me know that that is not correct. Even though it says 18 gauge, maybe they're measuring the cable here on the outside sleeve and not actually the copper. So these cables are not rated for the power that we're putting through. I couldn't believe it. So where did I get these from? Wasn't Parallel Miners. It was Amazon.com. I can't believe it. I have an entire drawer of these things. I literally am going to find every one of these that are this color, and you can tell by like the yellow, it has its own yellow color, and the 18 gauge. I'm just going to throw them out. I have a whole drawer of them. I'm just going to throw them out because he sent me these. Look at these. These are amazing. And he sent me these. So let's go ahead and talk to Veteran Miner and find out exactly what's going on here and how to avoid it. All right, guys. So we are here with Veteran Miner. How's it going, man? Thanks for joining me.
Hey, how you doing, Hobbyist?
Awesome. So we're going to go ahead and jump into things. We're going to talk with someone significantly smarter than me, and we do have the veteran miner here. So to help set the landscape, what is your experience within the electrical field, the space, just that entire genre?
Well, I've been doing electrical since I was a kid. I went to school for it. A little bit of my background. I went to AudioVox Corporation, worked in the engineering department on the 12-volt scene. So I know a lot about these wires, how components work. I also have a degree in computer networking. So I'm pretty versed with when it comes to wiring.
As I said, much smarter than me. We kind of introduced kind of how we got to here. We showed people the wires, we showed people what happened, we showed the breakout boards. So I'm going to throw it over to you. Like what exactly happened here? Why are the breakout boards brown? Why is my PCI cable melted to the breakout board? Kind of give us the rundown from your expertise and perspective.
Well, there's a lot of factors, but the main factor is the wire. Okay. So the gauge of the wire will dictate how many watts you can actually use in the gauge of the wire.
Okay.
But just because the gauge of the wire states 18 gauge or 16 gauge, that's not 100% correct. I've taken apart a lot of wires and it states 18 or 16 gauge and it's like 20 gauge or 24 gauge, meaning a
Wow.
very, very small gauge. So they're going to work for a certain amount of time, but from the heat dissipation, from the wires, the wattage that's going through the wires, you're thinking that you have a certain amount of gauge. You don't. They start browning and they start melting, like your situation. What happened?
Wow. Wow. So people understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, the lower the gauge, the thicker the copper. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So in our situation, it's saying it's 18 gauge on the cable. We believe it because it says that, but in reality, it wasn't actually 18 gauge when it came down to the copper. I think you had mentioned to me in private that sometimes they will measure like the entire cable, including the coating, and then they're like, "Oh, it's 18 gauge," when in reality it's not. So my cables were browning. The one cable literally like it was like busted apart almost. It looked like, and the one was
Yeah.
melted there. So thankfully I caught it, which was awesome. By the way, like it was still working. I just want to put it out there. Like even in that state. So as time goes on, what can happen here? Is it a fire? Is it just melting? What is the worst case scenario with this left unchecked?
Well, worst case scenario, it'll go on fire.
Okay.
Best case scenario, if it starts to melt, everything will shut down and that's
Yep.
it.
Okay.
Because you have uh, 5 grounds and 3 powers. That's how a PCI cable works on an 8
Okay.
pin. And then
Okay.
on the 6 pin, you have 3 powers and 3 grounds.
Okay.
So that's how it works. And the current
Okay.
runs through negative to positive. It's crazy, but that's how it works. And you'll have melting, and hopefully you don't have a fire, but you see this all the time. And since I got into the crypto space, I figure I could add value with the wires that I make.
100%. Yeah. That's something like I try to do a few times a week. It's just like survey, just spot check. And in this case here, now I'm like hyper aware. So I'm purchasing, going to go through and just replace all my PCI cables because yeah, they're expensive, 100%. Like I totally understand with people, but it's like at the end of the day, it's not worth it when it comes down to a fire or melting. So I'm like, okay, I'm just going to take all those cables and throw them out, and then make sure that I'm buying everything in that situation. So why does this happen exactly? We talked about kind of like the wiring and like, oh, it says that it's 18 gauge, but in reality it's actually 20 gauge. So why does that gauge matter? What causes something like this to happen from a gauge level?
So why the gauge matters on what you need to use to power
Yep,
something up? Okay.
correct. Yep.
So in this is how it works. The wiring itself, let's say 18 gauge wire. The 18 gauge wire needs to be a certain thickness, have to has a certain amount of strands in the wire to be considered a true 18 gauge wire.
Okay.
So when I don't know if you guys ever cut a wire open and you
Hmm.
just see the multi strands on the wire,
Yep.
so you can make a comparison. So you could count those strands, and you have to have a certain amount of strands
Wow.
to be considered a true 18 gauge wire or a true 16 gauge wire. So through R&D and looking at all these wires, not all the wires are going to go on fire. Okay,
Yeah.
can't say that. A lot of wires you have. How many crypto miners we have out there?
Yeah. Too many.
Right, and everyone's rigs aren't going on fire.
Yeah.
But you have a very large handful, more than a handful, of miners that are dealing with this on a daily basis
Yeah.
because it all depends on the gauge, the company that's making them, where you getting them from, reviews. It's just a lot of factors involved, and you you personally couldn't tell if this is the right gauge. It's
Hmm.
just on the research that you
Yeah.
did online, who you purchased it from, where you got it from, and you're going off of reviews. You would
Hmm.
actually physically have to take one set of wires, cut them up, count the strands, make sure it's sufficient for what you're looking to do. It's just, it's a
Yeah.
toss
Yeah, and that was my
up.
situation. Like I said in the video, I said I'm almost positive I purchased these from Amazon because I bought in a few of them from Amazon, and then I've also purchased my longer ones through Parallel Miners, and so that there's a lot of reassurances purchasing from Parallel Miners based off of just other miners' experience
Right.
versus something like Amazon, where, as you said, you really don't know what you're getting. You assume it's 18 gauge based off of what it says. So, moving forward, to kind of give our audience a kind of a heads up, what should they look for? You talked about reviews and stuff like that, but you got John Smith off the street. He's like, I want to make sure I buy the right cables to avoid what hobbyist miner ran into. What should he look for? Is there any ratings or do's and don'ts or anything like that?
Well, it's really hard, right? Because you have a million wires out there that are for sale by different manufacturers.
Mm.
It's just like you mentioned a major company, right?
Yep.
You have to look at the companies that might be in the same space that you're working with, and that'll give you a really good idea of, well, why is this wire more expensive than this one, but there's no problems with this wire?
Mm-hmm.
So it's you have to do a lot of research to find out what will work for you because not all we quote unquote inexpensive wires
Yeah.
will burn up, but you're taking that chance. It's quality. Let's just say, for argument's sake, you have a $500 GPU
Sure.
and you wanted to save $3 or $5 on a wire. Was it worth it?
Yeah,
So,
no, not at all. Not
so
at all. I run into that a lot with people where it's like you want to
yeah,
spend the money on the GPU, but you want your motherboard, your power supplies to be the cheapest possible. It's like, wait. So now that I think about it, let's
yeah,
jump back a tiny bit. So in the top of this video, I had showed and I provided screenshots to you as we got into this conversation. The existing couple connector was like over, it was like 230 some degrees Fahrenheit that I was using with my
it was
surface temperature gun. I love this thing. It's my new toy. But then when I look at other ones, my other connectors, those were more in like the 130s. And you had actually made some recommendations, like also check the cables and stuff like that. And people will see after this video of me using your cables that you custom made for me and the differences. But why was that connector like 200 some degrees? Like what causes that to happen? I mean, I understand why it melted now, but
right.
what causes that to happen versus the cable right next to it, which was at like a comfortable 113 to 130, somewhere in that range.
So you also have the pins, right? So let's
Okay.
say we're going to talk about your situation
Hmm.
directly. 6 pin, okay? Those out of those 6 pins, they carry current on each individual pin.
Okay.
So there's a possibility that the pin failed because that's another thing to look at, but you
Mm.
can't tell.
Yeah.
You can't tell unless someone's actually making them and you're able to, show them what you have. Molex. I'm sure you hold a Molex. Molex plugs
What?
connectors.
What's Molex? I don't know what that is.
But they're the manufacturer for pins and for
Yeah.
connectors and
Yep.
everything else, and they're a leading brand. You have other people, other companies that make these pins that go onto the wire and they fail because they can't handle the current. So there's a good possibility that it was inexpensive
Mm.
wire and a pin was failing, causing to melt.
Wow, that's insane. Okay, so in a minute here, we're gonna jump to the last half of this video where I get to show off these awesome cables that you sent me. I mean, these things are amazing. So
Thank you.
before we get into that part, let's tell people what are they looking at? So they're going to see a red cable, much, much thicker. I think it has some type of braided on the
Right.
outside. Kind of explain it to us, and then how it compares to what melted for me.
So I use high quality wire, like we were talking about the gauges. I
Mm-hmm.
have the true 16 gauge wire. That's what I'm marketing right now. A lot of the 16 gauge because it could handle more current.
Yeah.
Because 18 gauges, it'll work fine,
Yep.
but 16 gauge is really the right way to go.
Okay.
I don't want to get into Ohm's law or anything like that, but
Please don't. It'll
it,
be over my
yeah,
head.
the longer the cable is, the more resistance it carries.
Okay.
So resistance meaning that it's harder for the current to go through it the longer the cable is.
So that's why you asked me like what length I
What-
need, because you
Yeah,
want it to be almost exact. Got it. Okay.
right. So by me making cables that have the true gauge, like the Molex pins,
Mm-hmm.
you're able to have you need a perfect crimp as well. And my wire actually comes from Germany. So
Mm.
it's expensive.
Yeah, sure.
It's not cheap, but like I said, we're just saying a $500 GPU
Yeah.
for a couple of dollars more.
Yep.
Why wouldn't you?
Yeah, definitely, definitely. No, that makes sense. I mean, I'm excited to show these off. They look awesome. So before we go ahead and show our audience that, where can people find out more about you? Where can people check out your content? As I know you're a fellow content creator.
Yes. So the Veteran Miner on YouTube. I also have an Instagram and Twitter, and it's a fairly new channel. Um, and then we're gonna
So
set up.
go subscribe to his channel.
Oh, that sounds good. Thank you, hobbyists.
Absolutely. Well, guys, go check him out. I'll put links down below to all of that. And now we're going to jump to the last half of the video and check out these amazing cables. Check it out, guys. We got our new cables hooked up, good to go. Oh my gosh, they look amazing. Look at that. We got our 1, 2, 3, 4 different miners up here, all Doge and Litecoin miners. We got a new breakout board. Let's get that sucker powered up. Good to go. Thank you to the Veteran Miner for sending over these amazing PCI cables. Okay, guys, that's going to go ahead and wrap things up for today. Huge shout out to the Veteran Miner. I'll put a link down below to his channel. Once again, guys, just be crazy careful. I mean, seriously, look at this. This was like a house fire ready to happen right there. That is insane. I can't believe it. Anyways, guys, thank you guys very much for checking out today's short video. If you enjoyed the video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. And don't forget to subscribe. Take care.